Fear is the parent of cruelty. That sentence was once written by James Anthony Froude, and he was not wrong. If you look closely at how human behavior is shaped, not just in rare crises, but in daily life, you will find that fear rarely shouts, it whispers, and that whisper moves people faster than any well-formed argument ever could. You believe you are rational. You trust that the choices you make are guided by logic, by evidence, by careful thinking. You do not see yourself as someone manipulated. You imagine others are the ones who fall for tricks. But what if the very foundation of your confidence was quietly built on fear, not terror, not panic, something more subtle, the fear of loss, the fear of failure, the fear of rejection, the fear of being the only one left behind. Fear does not always live in nightmares. It thrives in headlines, in job reviews, in the eyes of someone you want approval from. Fear is not a rare visitor, it is a daily presence. You hear it in a parent's warning, in a teacher's tone, in an employer's silence, and when fear is present, logic becomes secondary. A groundbreaking experiment in 1996 by neuroscientist Joseph Ledoux showed how the brain's fear circuit bypasses logical processing. The amygdala receives sensory signals milliseconds before the cortex. That means fear reacts faster than thought. Before you even understand what you are seeing, you may already be running from it. You are not deciding, you are reacting, and you think you made a decision. This is the core of dark psychology, not horror, not drama, but the methodical use of psychological principles to shape behavior, perception, and choice without consent. Fear is its most reliable tool, because fear, unlike reason, does not wait for validation. It acts instantly. In the world of dark psychology, fear is used not just to cause harm, but to control, not with violence, but with influence, not with chaos, but with structure. Fear can be injected into policies, into education, into relationships. It becomes part of culture, of tradition, of obedience, and once installed, fear sustains itself. You no longer need to be reminded, you remind yourself. This is not a rare phenomenon. It is a mechanism deeply rooted in human survival. The brain evolved to prioritize fear, because early humans who hesitated in the presence of danger did not survive long enough to pass on their genes. That evolutionary advantage now manifests in decisions that appear irrational, but are biologically protective. The cost is that you obey fear more than you realize. You have seen people dismiss truth because it frightened them. You have watched others cling to lies that gave them safety. You have noticed how fear silences dissent, how it discourages curiosity, how it protects the lie by punishing those who question it. This is not coincidence. It is psychological conditioning, and it works. What if fear is not only more powerful than logic, but more permanent? What if your beliefs are not based on thought, but on the need to escape discomfort? The discomfort of being wrong, of being alone, of being exposed. Then logic becomes decoration, a post-rationalization for decisions already made by fear. This is where the real danger lies. Because when fear controls you, and you still believe you are in charge, there is no defense. You are no longer seeking truth. You are seeking comfort, and someone else is writing the script. In this video, we will walk into that territory together. The territory where fear takes root inside the mind, where logic fails to intervene, and where dark psychology shapes the very world you live in. This is not a story about monsters. This is about design. It has rules, it has patterns, and it has been working longer than you think. But before we go deeper, you need to ask yourself one thing. If fear is guiding your choices, how would you ever know? That answer will not be given yet, because it hides where you rarely look. And the reason you do not look there is exactly what we will begin uncovering next. From the first years of your life, you were told a story. You were taught that reason is your guide, that logic is your defense, that intelligence is your greatest power. Every system around you, schooling, authority, law, and reward, tells you that the rational mind separates humans from animals. You are told that what makes you different is your capacity to think. But this is not entirely true. In fact, it is barely true at all. The belief that logic controls human behavior is not just inaccurate, it is a cultural myth, one that has been repeated so often, it feels like common sense. That myth is supported by social praise, by educational systems, and even by scientific communities that favor rational explanation over emotional reality. But beneath that surface lies a deeper current, and that current is fear. You are not guided by reason as often as you believe. You are guided by memory, by emotional imprint, by subtle avoidance of pain, rejection, and uncertainty. And that guidance happens quickly, often instantly, before logic is even present. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman, in his work on cognitive biases, exposed how human thinking is divided between two systems. One is fast, automatic, emotional. The other is slow, deliberate, rational. And when both systems respond, it is the fast one that speaks first, moves first, chooses first. Fear lives in that fast system. Logic only arrives later, often too late. But here is the more disturbing truth. Most people do not even notice this process. They trust their conclusions, not knowing those conclusions were framed by fear. When you avoid a conversation, when you hesitate before speaking, when you delay a decision that threatens your image, you are not being logical, you are responding to fear. Dark psychology takes advantage of this gap. It does not need to overpower logic, it only needs to get there first. It does so with urgency, with threat, with imagined consequence. Once fear enters the body, the rational brain loses access to its higher functions. This is not a metaphor, it is neurochemical. Research in affective neuroscience has shown how stress hormones alter brain function. Cortisol, released during fear responses, suppresses activity in the prefrontal cortex. That is the very area responsible for reasoning, judgment, and reflection. Fear changes the brain's hierarchy. It tells the brain what to prioritize, and survival always outranks truth. Yet society continues to feed the illusion of rational control. It builds reputations on it. It constructs institutions around it. This illusion comforts people because logic can be defended, but fear, when seen directly, feels weak. And no one wants to be seen as weak, so people hide from the truth of their own reactions. They call their fear-based choices strategic. They say they are being careful. They say it is logic. It is not. This is the lie, that you are free because you are rational, that you are in control because you are thinking, that others are manipulated, but you are immune. Dark psychology thrives on that illusion. It does not need to convince you. It only needs to let you convince yourself. The real danger is not fear itself. The real danger is that fear disguises itself as reason. It uses your voice. It speaks in your words. It wears the mask of thought. You repeat what fear wants you to say, and you believe it came from within. This is how control spreads without violence, without confrontation, through systems, through habits, through expectations. Fear is not loud, but it is patient. It shapes behavior with silence. It does not need your attention. It only needs your repetition. If you are still watching, then you are beginning to see the crack in the story you were told. You are beginning to suspect that what you call logic may often be a postscript to fear. That suspicion is important. It is the first step toward clarity, but clarity is not comfortable. If this made you question something you assumed to be true, then let it sit with you. And if you have the strength, write it down in the comments. What belief did you inherit that now feels uncertain? What action have you labeled rational that may have been driven by fear? You are not the only one asking, and you are not the only one afraid to find the answer. We will now begin moving into the structure of the mind itself, where fear is stored, where it activates, where it speaks before you do. In 2003, neuroscientist Joseph Ledoux demonstrated something that should have changed how we understand human thought forever. His research proved that signals from a threatening stimulus reach the amygdala faster than the neocortex. That means fear reaches the brain before logic even has a chance to respond. You do not think your way into fear. You feel it, and only later try to make sense of it. That delay, measured in milliseconds, is what dark psychology counts on. Fear lives in the lower brain, the amygdala, the hippocampus, the hypothalamus. These regions have one job: keep you alive. They do not care about truth. They care about survival. And survival is not about accuracy. It is about reaction. If you hear footsteps behind you in a dark alley, you do not start with logical deduction. You start with panic. You move first. You think later. This system was not a mistake. It is evolutionary biology. In pre-modern environments, delayed reactions often meant death. The faster you perceived a threat, the more likely you were to escape it. Over time, the human brain developed an automatic pathway, a shortcut. It sends raw data straight to the amygdala before the neocortex has time to evaluate it. This is known as the low road. It saves lives. It also destroys logic. When fear is activated, it releases a biochemical storm. Cortisol floods the system, adrenaline spikes. Blood flow is redirected from the prefrontal cortex to the limbs. Your body prepares to run or fight, not to think or reflect. The logical part of your brain becomes a spectator, not a leader. It watches fear take the controls. This is not a theory, it is physical fact. Multiple functional MRI studies, including those led by Elizabeth Phelps and Tali Sharot, show clear reductions in cortical activity during emotionally charged fear stimuli. Under stress, logic is chemically weakened. Emotion becomes the dominant mode. That is not failure, that is function. But in modern society, the threats are not saber-toothed predators. They are deadlines, rejections, public embarrassment, social isolation, financial loss. Those threats still activate the same circuit. Your body still treats criticism like a tiger, and you respond accordingly. You avoid, you submit, you retreat. You do not pause to reason through it. Dark psychology exploits this process with precision. It uses media to stimulate fear. It uses authority to trigger submission. It uses repetition to create association. It knows that if it can reach your amygdala before your cortex, it wins. Because once fear is triggered, logic must wait its turn. This explains why people vote against their interests, why they stay in abusive relationships, why they obey unjust orders. It is not because they are irrational. It is because fear takes priority. They feel first, they obey the signal, and only later, they try to explain it with words that sound rational. But those words came after the decision, not before. Fear is faster than you. It is older than you. It is stronger than you think. You can meditate, you can study, you can analyze, but when fear enters your body, it will still interrupt you. You are not ruled by logic. You are managed by reflexes, dressed in emotional clothing. And if you think you are immune, then fear has already done its job. Control does not always come with a weapon. It does not always need a command. In many cases, it only needs a feeling. That feeling is fear. And once installed, it no longer requires maintenance. It becomes self-sustaining. That is why fear is the most valuable currency in dark psychology. It buys obedience. It purchases silence. It guarantees submission. Look closely at how modern institutions operate. Schools do not just teach knowledge, they teach compliance. Students do not ask certain questions, not because they lack curiosity, but because they fear punishment, embarrassment, isolation. Workplaces manage behavior through fear of demotion, exclusion, or unemployment. Even laws rely less on moral conviction and more on the fear of consequence. The fear of what might happen is more effective than what actually does. Governments have known this for centuries. Fear is used to manufacture consent. The public does not need to be convinced. It only needs to be afraid of the alternative. This is not speculation. In 1971, the Stanford prison experiment, led by Philip Zimbardo, revealed how easily individuals conform to authority under the pressure of fear. The guards became abusive, not because they were evil, but because the system gave them permission. and the prisoners feared the consequences of defiance. Fear made them compliant, even when no real harm was being done. The illusion was enough. Dark psychology does not require physical violence. It only needs perception. A threat does not have to be real. It just has to feel real. If people believe they will suffer for speaking up, they will remain silent. If they believe they will be punished for asking questions, they will obey. That is control, and it costs nothing but fear. This tactic is everywhere. In advertising, fear of inadequacy is used to drive consumption. In politics, fear of outsiders is used to gain power. In relationships, fear of abandonment is used to maintain control. The method is ancient, the delivery is modern. Social media amplifies fear with precision. Algorithms prioritize outrage. Fear-based content spreads faster, gets more clicks, drives more engagement, not because people love fear, but because fear demands attention. It activates the same neurological circuit that once warned humans about predators. You scroll, but your brain is scanning for danger. Every post, every image, every headline competes to hijack your attention, and fear wins. Propaganda does not start with lies. It starts with fear. Once fear is present, people no longer care about truth. They care about security. They will follow whatever narrative promises to protect them, even if it leads them deeper into manipulation, even if it turns them against their own interests. What makes this dangerous is that fear is invisible until it is named. You do not feel controlled. You feel careful. You feel responsible. You feel safe. That is how fear hides. It wears the mask of wisdom. It pretends to be logic, and it convinces you that your obedience is your idea. This is the core technique of psychological manipulation, not to force behavior, but to make it feel chosen. The illusion of free will is stronger when fear shapes the boundaries. You think you are free because you do not see the fence, but the fence is made of fear, and it was built long before you arrived. There is a reason people remain in environments that hurt them. There is a reason they defend systems that exploit them. It is not always ignorance. Sometimes it is conditioning. Fear creates a pattern. The pattern becomes familiar, and familiarity feels safer than freedom. You can study logic for years. You can memorize philosophy. But if fear has the final word in your decisions, then knowledge becomes a decoration, not a defense. Control is no longer enforced. It is internalized. It lives inside your choices, your language, your silence. Fear does not need to imprison you. It only needs to convince you that leaving is worse. You are taught to believe that logic is your guide, that reason can protect you, that if you just think clearly enough, you will make the right decisions. But the brain does not function in that order. Logic is never first, emotion is always ahead, and fear, among all emotions, sits at the front of the line. In 1994, neurologist Antonio Damasio studied patients with damage to the ventromedial prefrontal cortex. These individuals retained high intelligence. They could solve puzzles, analyze information, explain reasoning, but they could not make simple decisions. They struggled to choose lunch. They failed at basic planning. Why? Because they had lost the ability to feel. Without emotional input, logic alone was useless. Their lives fell apart, not due to a lack of reason, but due to the absence of emotion. Damasio called this the somatic marker hypothesis. Every decision, he found, is marked by a physical signal, an emotional cue that tells the brain how to prioritize. Emotion guides attention. It shapes memory. It determines what matters, and fear is the loudest marker of all. Your brain does not wait for full information. It jumps ahead, based on past emotional patterns. If a decision carries risk, your body responds before your mind analyzes. If the risk feels familiar, the emotional memory takes control. That memory may come from years ago. It may not even be accurate, but it governs you more than data ever could. Dark psychology exploits this mechanism by planting emotional triggers in your path. These triggers bypass the need for argument. They activate fear reflexes through symbols, stories, images, and consequences. Once triggered, your reasoning capacity narrows. You move into defensive cognition. That is when logic is no longer used to find truth. It is used to protect comfort. Cognitive neuroscientist Tali Sharot showed that emotionally charged information is remembered more vividly and for longer periods. The brain gives priority to emotional data. Fear-based memories are stored with greater strength and recalled with greater speed. That means once fear has shaped a memory, it becomes harder to overwrite. The fear becomes permanent. The logic fades. In social systems, this principle is used to structure influence. Institutions associate certain behaviors with shame or danger. Once those connections are learned, they are not questioned. A person may know that the punishment is unlikely, but the fear is embedded. The result is automatic avoidance. No logic required. Marketing professionals use fear of exclusion. Religious groups use fear of sin. Parents use fear of disappointment. Schools use fear of failure. In each case, the method is the same. Trigger the emotional marker first, then let logic come afterward to justify the response. The emotional tail wags the rational dog. This is not weakness. This is design. The brain evolved to favor fast emotional input because survival required it. You do not need logic to run from fire. You do not need analysis to escape threat. You need speed, and fear delivers that speed without waiting. The tragedy is not that emotion shapes decisions. The tragedy is that people still believe they are thinking clearly when they are not. They believe they are being rational while reacting from fear. They defend their choices as thoughtful when those choices were carved by pain, shame, or survival instincts. A rational mind trapped in fear is like a surgeon holding a scalpel in the middle of a burning room. The tool is useless if the environment is already lost. You are not failing at logic. You were never given the conditions to use it. Fear entered first. It locked the door. Then it asked you to explain yourself. You live with the impression that you are making choices, that each day, each hour, you weigh your options, consider your values, and decide. But most of what you call decisions are reactions. They are shaped by conditions you did not notice, signals you did not question, fears you did not recognize. The illusion of choice is the most powerful effect fear creates. It allows you to feel in control, while control is being directed elsewhere. You turn down opportunities, avoid conflicts, stay silent in conversations, delay projects, not because you are being cautious, but because fear whispered first. It framed the boundaries, and inside those boundaries, everything feels like a choice. But you never saw who drew the lines. Behavioral economist Dan Ariely ran a series of experiments showing how default options shape decisions. When people were given multiple options for organ donation or insurance plans, they overwhelmingly chose the default setting, even when it was not beneficial. Why? Because uncertainty triggers anxiety. Anxiety triggers avoidance. People do not choose what they want. They choose what feels safest to fear. Fear does not just shape outcomes. It narrows the frame. It tells you what to consider and what to ignore. In dark psychology, this is the foundation of priming. Prime the mind with a threat, and it will search for safety. It will not search for truth. Safety comes first. When you browse news, fear shapes what you click. When you hear opinions, fear filters what you accept. When you scroll through life, fear is the lens between your perception and reality. The illusion is that you are the one choosing. But if every choice was already shaped by fear, then what is left of you? This illusion is necessary for many systems to operate. Consumer culture relies on fear of missing out. Corporate loyalty relies on fear of instability. Political allegiance is maintained through fear of the other side. Without fear, most of these identities collapse. You are told you are loyal, you are told you are loyal, but you are afraid. Even in private life, you choose partners, friends, roles, often through the residue of old wounds. You do not always move toward joy. You move away from discomfort. If you fear abandonment, you cling. If you fear failure, you settle. If you fear judgment, you stay quiet. And you call these actions maturity, responsibility, wisdom. But what if they are not? What if they are escape strategies you have polished into personality? Dark psychology does not manipulate people by force. It reframes the environment until they guide themselves. And that is the terrifying part. When you do not feel manipulated, you cannot resist it. You explain your actions with words that sound noble. You wrap fear in language. You decorate it with values. And you carry it with pride. This is not a glitch. This is how the brain works. The amygdala creates the threat map. The hippocampus recalls the associated memory. The body prepares the signal. And before your neocortex arrives, the emotional decision has been made. What you call thinking is often just translation. You live inside patterns shaped by survival instincts. Fear created those patterns, and now those patterns make your decisions. You respond to symbols without realizing they are symbols. A tone of voice, a facial expression, a delay in response. You interpret each through the language of fear, and then you act. Free will becomes theater. You are not choosing, you are avoiding, you are not reaching, you are protecting, you are not progressing, you are staying safe. The most dangerous part is this: if fear can disguise itself as logic, as love, as duty, then you will serve it forever, thinking you are free. From the earliest days of human existence, fear has not only shaped behavior, it has shaped belief. When people could not explain the storm, they feared the gods. When they could not cure the illness, they feared the curse. When they could not face mortality, they created eternity. Philosophers have long asked whether belief begins with thought or with fear, and history answers quietly. Fear comes first. In existential philosophy, the confrontation with death is described as the foundation of all meaning. Søren Kierkegaard wrote about the dread of possibility. Friedrich Nietzsche described fear of the abyss that stares back. Jean-Paul Sartre argued that fear of freedom itself leads to bad faith, where the individual hides behind roles and routines to escape responsibility. Each thinker found the same root, that human beings are not afraid of suffering. They are afraid of meaninglessness. Fear strips life of clarity before thought can form. You do not wake up fearing pain. You fear the absence of direction, the absence of control. You fear not knowing what your role is, what your value is, what your next step means. In that vacuum, you grab for anything: religion, identity, politics, purpose. Not because you are certain, but because certainty protects you from fear. Dark psychology uses this vulnerability by supplying ready-made meanings. It gives people enemies to blame, systems to trust, rituals to follow, not because those things are right, but because they relieve uncertainty. Propaganda is not about information. It is about giving people a place to stand, so they do not fall into fear. It wraps ideology around insecurity. And people believe, not because they understand, but because they are afraid of what would happen if they did not believe. Meaning built on fear does not expand your life, it reduces it. You accept routines, not because they fulfill you, but because they dull the silence. You conform not because you agree, but because non-conformity invites isolation. You stay close to the familiar, not because it is good, but because it is predictable. And predictability feels safe. Fear of death is only one part of it. More dangerous is the fear of being forgotten, the fear that your life will pass unnoticed, that your struggles will be erased, that your name will mean nothing. So you fight to be seen, you fight to leave a mark, but sometimes that fight becomes distortion. You choose paths not for their value, but for the illusion that they protect you from disappearing. This is why people repeat what others say, wear what others wear, adopt beliefs they never examine, not because they lack intelligence, but because fear overwhelms reflection. In the search for meaning, fear is a false compass. It points away from the unknown. It directs you towards safety, and in doing so, it may pull you away from the truth. Philosophy demands discomfort. It demands that you face fear without flinching, that you stand at the edge of uncertainty and do not run. But most people are not trained for that. They are trained to obey the emotional cues that make life feel manageable. And so, even when they ask deep questions, they search for answers that relieve fear, not ones that confront it. Fear does not only control your actions, it builds the framework through which you perceive the world. What you call truth may simply be what fear allows you to see. What you call meaning may just be the absence of terror. The greatest deception that fear creates is not panic, it is comfort. The kind of comfort that keeps you numb, obedient, and distracted, while life slips past you, disguised as routine. In 1961, psychologist Stanley Milgram conducted an experiment that changed how we understand obedience. Participants were told to administer electric shocks to another person simply because a man in a lab coat told them to. The shocks were fake, the screams were recorded, but the participants believed it was real. 65% of them delivered the highest voltage. They heard the cries, saw the suffering, and continued, not because they enjoyed it, but because they were afraid to resist authority. Fear does not always look like panic. It often looks like obedience. In modern society, obedience has been rebranded as responsibility, but underneath the surface, people comply, not because they believe something is right, but because they fear what will happen if they do not. Fear of standing out, fear of punishment, fear of disapproval. Dark psychology weaponizes this with strategic precision. The goal is not to create violence. The goal is to engineer consensus. That is achieved through silent pressure, invisible structures, and social signals that reward conformity and punish resistance. The crowd becomes the enforcer, and fear becomes the rule. Solomon Asch demonstrated this in his famous conformity experiments. He showed that individuals would give clearly wrong answers to simple visual questions, just because everyone else in the group gave the same wrong answer. The need to belong was stronger than the need to be correct. Fear of exclusion was more powerful than personal truth. You think you speak your mind, but every environment you enter shapes what you feel safe to say. In classrooms, students silence themselves to avoid looking foolish. In offices, workers withhold criticism to avoid retaliation. In families, members pretend agreement to avoid conflict. These are not lies. They are survival strategies built on fear. Obedience is taught early. Children are rewarded for compliance, punished for resistance, not just by parents, but by entire systems. Schools grade behavior, religions assign sin, social circles reward mimicry. By adulthood, people no longer need to be threatened. They monitor themselves, they stay within the lines. Not because the lines are good, but because they fear what lies beyond them. Fear does not always come from above. It circulates laterally, peer-to-peer. In digital spaces, a single opinion can spark backlash. Cancel culture punishes deviation. Algorithms amplify outrage. Fear of online humiliation now shapes real-world behavior. People filter themselves, they edit their thoughts, they obey the emotional atmosphere. In group dynamics, fear moves faster than logic. When a crowd panics, the individual disappears. Rational thought is replaced by reactive imitation. Psychologist Gustave Le Bon, in his work on crowd behavior, showed how collective identity lowers inhibition. In groups, people follow emotion, not reason. They surrender judgment in exchange for unity. Fear of isolation drives people to become echoes of each other. Dark psychology understands this. It does not need to silence everyone. It only needs to silence one person loudly. The rest will fall into line. One public punishment teaches 10,000 people to keep quiet. Fear spreads like a signal. It does not need repetition. It only needs visibility. You are trained to think that freedom means doing what you want, but real freedom would mean speaking what you truly think. And that freedom is rare, because the moment fear enters the room, silence becomes strategy. Even the strongest minds hesitate. Even the strongest minds hesitate. Even the boldest spirits calculate risk. What society calls peace may simply be a population that has learned how to fear in the same direction. You want to believe that awareness is enough, that if you understand how fear works, you can resist it, that if you see the patterns, you can break them. But fear does not live in knowledge, it lives in the body, it waits beneath the surface, and it does not need permission to return. You can study psychology, you can memorize philosophy, you can dissect your childhood, examine your habits, challenge your thoughts, but none of that guarantees escape, because fear is not just an idea, it is an instinct. It bypasses intention, and when triggered, it rewrites your choices without asking. Even the most enlightened minds have been ruled by fear. The Stoics, who taught emotional detachment, still spoke of courage as a daily practice, not a permanent state. The Buddhists warned that fear of suffering leads to clinging, and clinging is the root of suffering itself. The existentialists faced fear head-on, only to admit that life without fear is not life, it is denial. This is why fear cannot be eliminated. It must be faced, understood, and navigated. You cannot remove fear, but you can refuse to obey it blindly, and that begins with recognition. You must learn to feel the presence of fear before it speaks. In a conversation where you begin to shrink, in a decision where you hesitate, not from doubt, but from dread, in a choice that feels safe, but smells of surrender. That moment is not failure, it is a chance. Mindfulness is not a trend, it is a discipline designed to make fear visible. By watching your thoughts without judgment, you begin to separate yourself from the reactions they produce. You begin to notice which voices in your head are yours, and which were planted. The fear that came from a parent's silence, a teacher's criticism, a stranger's mockery. You start to see the structure of fear, and once you see it, you can stop mistaking it for truth. Dark psychology loses power when fear is exposed, because exposure interrupts the loop. When you name what scares you, the amygdala relaxes, the threat loses urgency, the prefrontal cortex regains its voice. It begins to ask questions, and questions are fear's enemy. But be warned, this process is not comfortable. Growth rarely is. You will have to sit with discomfort. You will have to accept that some of your most cherished beliefs were built on avoidance, that some of your achievements were born, not of passion, but of panic, that your personality may have been shaped by defense, not desire. The escape is not a door, it is a mirror, and most people never look into it, because to see fear clearly is to see how much of yourself has been molded by it. So ask yourself, not what you want, but what you fear. Ask why you avoid what you avoid. Ask why certain people trigger silence inside you, why certain places make your body tighten, why certain ideas make your chest close. If you are ready, write one of those fears below. Not to conquer it, not to display it, but to make it visible. Because what is visible can be observed, and what is observed can be changed. You cannot escape fear, but you can stop letting it drive. And when that day comes, your choices begin to look different. Your words sound different. Your face feels different. Fear is a natural part of life, but allowing it to control your decisions will keep you trapped in a life that does not belong to you. By now you have seen the patterns. Fear shapes your behavior before you realize it. It alters your memories, your logic, your values. It builds the cage, paints it gold, and convinces you that you chose it. And yet, most people are not looking to escape, they are looking to stay safe. Truth is heavy. It requires you to examine yourself without comfort. It asks you to question the rules you have lived by. It demands that you see how much of your life has been designed by fear, not by freedom. Most people do not reject truth because it is false. They reject it because it is dangerous. If you remove fear from your decisions, what would change? Would you leave your job? Would you speak the truth to someone you have been avoiding? Would you walk away from a life you never chose? That possibility is terrifying, and that is why fear wins. It offers certainty, it offers routine, it offers you a script that never forces you to think too deeply. In return, it asks only one thing, that you do not question it. Dark psychology thrives on this trade. It offers safety in exchange for silence, approval in exchange for obedience, belonging in exchange for agreement. It does not need to lie to you. It only needs to remind you what could happen if you resist. And most people never do. But you are not most people. You made it to the end. You sat through the discomfort. You heard what others avoid. That means something inside you is awake. Maybe not fully, maybe not clearly, but it is stirring, and it wants to see what lies beyond fear. You do not need to overthrow everything at once, but you must begin to notice when fear is speaking, when fear is choosing, when fear is shaping what you believe and who you become. Awareness does not remove fear, but it removes its mask. And when the mask falls, the control weakens. So you must decide, do you want safety or do you want truth? You cannot have both. Safety will protect the system you are already in. Truth will break it. One will comfort you, the other will challenge everything. If this video gave you clarity, insight or unease, then share it with someone who is still trapped in silence. Someone who needs to see how fear works and how deep it goes. Leave a comment below about the fear that has shaped you most. Not to expose weakness, but to begin the process of reclaiming your choices. Subscribe if you are ready to continue down this path. We will go deeper into dark psychology, not to manipulate, but to uncover what is hidden. The next truth will not be easier, but it will be real. Truth is not always beautiful, but it is the only thing that can make you free.